We have with us now Mike Hurd, who will speak about the effects of the economic crisis on the older population, how expectations, consumption, requests, and retirement by the older population responded to the market shocks. Mike?
Thank you. I'll first start talking about the data because this is really data-driven, and I think you'll agree, or at least I hope you'll agree, that we have some very good data for studying at least the first phase of this financial crisis in Great Recession. The core data set is the Health and Retirement Study, and I haven't put on all slides the age group this refers to, but it's age 51 and above. It's on many of the slides, but you should keep this in mind that it doesn't refer to the entire age range. So we'll use data from the core survey in 2006-2008. The 2010 data are not yet available, which will be very informative, but we're still at least 6 months away from having those data ready. But of special interest is an internet survey that we put in the field in 2009. It's a subsample of HRS, limited to those who have access to the internet and who agreed to participate in the survey. We asked a number of questions in the internet survey. The key variables that I will talk about today are expectations, but an important aspect of this is that everything I will talk about is panel data set because we have the same people in the internet survey that we have in the core survey, so we can look at changes at the individual level. The second data set that I will use is also a subset of the HRS called the Consumption and Activities Mail Survey, or CAMS, and you see its description of what is sampling up there. The main value of CAMS for this is we ask a complete inventory of spending in some 36 categories. These aggregate up very closely to the CEX, and they also help to explain observed wealth change, so I think we're capturing almost all of spending in the CAMS. And again, we have panel data on spending on these people both before and after, at least partway through the Great Recession. So what I'll show you are a few slides to fix ideas about where our data come from with respect to various indicators of the recession. So on the far right of this graph, you see the dotted line. That's when the internet survey was fielded, pretty close to the bottom point of the S&P 500. And then the two shaded areas are HRS 2008 and farther to the left, HRS 2006, the field periods for those. And you can see the 2008 is partway into the recession. 2006, of course, is prior to the Great Recession. The CAMS was fielded in October on odd years, and the dotted red lines show the field when it's actually fielded, and it requests information about spending over the prior 12 months. So, for example, on the extreme right, you see that CAMS was fielded in October 2009 and is requesting spending data basically at the bottom point of the recession as measured by the S&P 500. And the previous CAMS, the 2007, was really towards the peak with respect to the S&P 500. So we're in CAMS, we have a pretty good peak to trough observation. And here are the same data with respect to the Case-Shiller house price index for the HRS. But I do want to point out Case-Shiller does not represent the entire population. It's 20-city average. And where you happen to, there it is with respect to CAMS, where you happen to live matters a whole lot. Here are house price indices from Case-Shiller for 4 cities. And if you happen to live in Denver, you would not have seen anything happen, either up or down. And if you happen to live in Detroit, it's always been down. If you were in Phoenix or Los Angeles, you see a big roller coaster ride. But there are a lot of people who don't live in these 20 cities, and Case-Shiller tends to sample cities on the coast and in volatile areas, and as we'll see, our own housing price index shows much less volatility than Case-Shiller. And with the unemployment rate, there is the 2008 HRS with respect to unemployment rate and the internet survey and also CAMS. So what I first will show is actual change in spending in panel. So this is not synthetic panel, it's over the same households between 2007 2009, and you can see that's from what I showed before, that's basically peak to trough. And I will compare spending and also later compare changes in subjective expectations based on HRS and the Internet survey. So let's look at first changes in actual spending in panel. We have to control a little bit for life cycle effects, especially in the older population, because of according to our basic life cycle model, spending should decline with age, and since we're looking at a 2-year age interval, we know there is some decline. So I'll compare. This will be a triple diffs type comparison. Compare 2-year changes in normal times with 2-year change between 2007 and 2009, where the normal times are defined as you see at the bottom there. So here's what we see. First look at age 51 to 64, 2001 to 2007. That's the left-hand blue bar. A 2-year decline of about 1% in total spending. You could call that, when we look at the data in detail, we see that's really due to a slight change in household composition, a slight reduction in the number of people in the household, about 1% per year. The next bar is what happened between 2007 and 2009. We see a fall of around 8.5% in spending panel. And so a double diffs there would be about 7.5% would be attributed to, might be attributed to the recession. Then if you look at age 65 and above, in normal times you see about a 5% decline in spending, which is in accord with what you might expect from a life cycle type model. And then 2007, 2009, about 8% or so, so it's somewhat of a decline compared to normal times for those aged 65 and above, but not very much. And this is in accord with the notion that the older population is fairly well insulated from the effects of the recession. And we'll see other examples of that. So that's spending. And this accords with qualitative survey responses that were talked about earlier, and also what we'll see in our own data. The rest of the results will be then from HRS 2006, 2008, and the Internet survey. We ask in the Internet survey at the household level, how's your spending now compared to a year ago? And among those 55 to 64, somewhat around 33% said their spending was lower than a year ago. About 15% said that it was higher, but obviously the preponderance is for a decline in spending as reported by households. And you see a strong age gradient there, 65 to 74. There I would call those roughly equal declines and reductions, and among those 75 above, actually more people reported an increase than a decrease. But certainly the age pattern is there, and it's consistent with what we saw before when we saw actual spending, the same kind of pattern. We asked people who reported a decline, what are the important reasons among those who stated a decline? And by far the most important statement, 85% of people said it was because they're worried about the economic future. So even people who have not been affected directly, or may not have been affected directly through stock holdings or house price declines, are nonetheless reduced spending because of worries about the economic future. Lower income, need to reduce debt, you can see those things. Stocks and house values are mentioned, but not nearly as frequently as the ones above it. House value, we asked for self-reports in the HRS. These have been studied, and they're actually fairly quite accurate. And this will compare them to Case-Shiller on the left, our mean house values reported in HRS 2006, 2008, and 2009. And you can see a very substantial decline in mean, but much less decline than in the Case-Shiller. The right sets of bars, minus 13% is what we see in HRS at median, but the Case-Shiller is minus 28%. So in my view, if you want to understand the behavior or the experience of a typical household, you'll be misled by looking at Case-Shiller. I think these reports are better representation of the entire population. Household debt, or housing debt I should say, this is mortgages, actually increased a little bit between 2008 and 2009, despite the fact that these people should be paying off mortgages at this part of the life cycle. It did increase a little bit, and the fraction of homeowners underwater, you can see jumped very substantially between 2008 and 2009, where you see among homeowners with debt almost 7% underwater. And this, of course, has not changed very much and may have even gotten worse. We measure expectations by subjective probabilities. You see the statement of how they're gathered here with respect to your home. What are the chances your home will be worth more in a year than it is today? And we ask for some additional targets. I just want you to focus here on the first line. The average subjective probability is about 32%. And if this were Bernoulli sampling with probability 0.32, you would expect in 1/3 of the years housing values would go up and in 2/3 they would go down. That's a pretty high level of pessimism that people have about their house values. You see down at the bottom, if you actually look at one-year changes in 88% of years, house values went up. And so this is a very pessimistic view about the future course of housing. And even 5 years from now, only 54%, the average is only 54%. These should be much higher numbers if people had so-called rational expectations. Stock market gain. We ask about the subjective probability of a gain in a one-year horizon. HRS 2008, 52% was the average gain, which is not very pessimistic, but at least it's on the positive side. It's about 0.5. In 2009, just 41%, so people are quite pessimistic. Here, this shows the cumulative distributions in those 2 years across households. And how you read these distributions is that a shift to the left in the distribution means more pessimism. And you can read off this in 2008, the median was about 50%. In 2009, the median has shifted to leftward until it's around 40%. So much more pessimistic about the stock market. Again, certainly does not display rational expectations if you think rational expectations should be generated from, say, a 20-year horizon of returns. And we've seen this in other data where people have momentum expectations. They're influenced strongly in their expectations by what has happened recently. Bequests, people have lost money. How do they translate that in terms of bequests? We actually ask for the subjective probability that they'll give bequests above these target amounts. And how you read this is that the subjective average probability that people will leave a bequest of less than $10,000 was in 2008 just 16%, and that had now increased by 2009 to 24%. So, and then looking at the bottom line, we can calculate mean expected bequests have fallen from around 500,000 to 430,000. So some of this loss is going to come out of bequests, some out of consumption. We don't really know how to divide that yet, but we'll be able to do that with when we get more data. The last thing I want to talk about is responses to the labor market. The stock market decline would suggest from a life cycle perspective an increase in retirement age. From a labor market perspective, possibly a reduction in retirement age because of unemployment and the difficulty of getting a job after displacement. And in fact, Social Security, you may remember, reported a big uptick in the people claiming between age 62 and 65, which surprised me because I thought the stock market explanation would dominate and people would stay in longer, but that is not what Social Security found. Well, I think the explanation is there are two groups of people, one influenced by stock market and the other by labor market, and we can see that right here. We ask the subjective probability of working past age 62 or 65 among those working in 2008. The left bar gives the average probability, and that was about 58%, and in 2009 it had increased to a little bit over 60%. And past age 65, even a larger increase. So among those people who were working in 2008, the subjective probability of working longer had increased, and this is in true panel. But some of these people who were working in 2008 were no longer working in 2009. The transition was around 14% out of the labor force. And among those people, we see quite a different pattern. This shows the subjective probability of working past age 62 among the same group, but now cross-classified by whether they were working in 2009 or not. And you can see those who were working in 2009 a very large increase in the probability of working past age 62. But those who were not working in 2009 had a decrease. And they, in my interpretation, are responding to the worse labor market. They're not working, and they have had to reduce their probability of working in the future. Same thing, age 65, but even a little bit stronger. So our conclusions are substantial spending reductions over a 2-year time period, made around 7.6% greater than during normal times. It corresponds with what self-reports are about households saying whether they had reduced spending or not. Age differences, the retired population is pretty well insulated, but there are family connections here, and we see in other surveys that they are responding to the distress of their children. Small increase in household debt, sharp increase in underwater, expected bequest went down quite sharply. Is the recession over? According to NBER dating, it is, because NBER dating indeed does measure recession, that is things getting worse, but it certainly is not over from the point of view of our respondents.